Hey, what's up, Exiles? So I have come to talk to you today about a new build that I've been enjoying. It is a little bit odd, a little bit of an odd build, um, because as you can see, we're using some interesting choices for gear that a lot of other people are not really using. Um, this is a Glacial Cascade build. The tooltip DPS is about 15k. It jumps up to, I believe, 23 when I have all my power charges up. 23k is about what I'm running when I'm running around inside of a map. About half of that, if you look at the chaos damage, and I'm pointing, of course, because you can see my damn finger. The chaos damage is about half of the damage, with cold damage being about a third of the damage, physical damage being about a sixth of the damage. Shackles of the Wretched is what makes this build really interesting and also really unusual. We use cast when damage taken punishment on our Shackles of the Wretched to effectively continuously refresh punishment on us, so that we're always punishing ourselves. Isn't that great? Yeah, look at that. We're dealing about 200 to 300 physical damage every time we hit, and our crit multiplier is 659k, so that is on a crit we're reflecting about, what is this, 28% of 250-ish times 6.5. It's a good amount of damage. So I'm also running Malachi's Simula. My passive tree doesn't have a lot of space for spell damage, so the spell damage mod on here actually does quite a bit for us. Also, it gives us blood magic, which is something that I could spec down to in the tree, but you'll see that there's not a lot of nodes that are on the way to blood magic that get me anything that I like, so I kind of don't like the decision to spec down that way to begin with. I've got Dodra's Damning, because in addition to cursing everything in myself with punishment, I'm also wanting to curse everything with Warlord's Mark, so that I can leech more, because I'm killing myself every time I hit things. I also have, as additional curses, Assassin's Mark and Enfeeble, for situations where I just either need to deal a ton of damage and I can't afford the extra leech, or when I can't, when the boss deals too much damage and I need to use it to bring his damage down to size rather than lessening the amount I have to reflect. Rather than upping my my leech, I should say. So I've got Glacial Cascade linked to Life Leech, added Chaos damage, increased area of effect, Spell Echo, and increased critical damage. That is the normal part of the build. It's a pretty straightforward Glacial Cascade. Except that after I take enough damage, I punish myself. And from there on, I continue to deal myself damage. And when I deal myself damage, I have Glacial Cascade and Ice Spear linked to Power Charge on critical and a level 1 cast when damage taken. The effect of this is that every time I deal myself 500 damage, I will cast 2 spells to gain power charges. I have another cast when damage taken, linked to a level 1 Warlord's Mark. I have this not on Shackles, you'll notice, because Shackles of the Wretched only applies to curses in this item, and I want Warlord's Mark on them, not me, because I don't want to be stunned. I also have Power Charge on critical attached to Arc. Arc in this case, even though the critical strike chance is a little bit smaller, is nice because it auto hits the enemy. You don't have to worry about things being too far away, or, for instance, a frost wall being in between me and it. I really like frost walls in most of my builds, which is weird, but that, you know, when you're running Shackles of the Wretched, you may as well be as weird as possible. So I really like having a lot of frost walls up, and you'll notice when I get rolling, I do have an awful lot of frost walls up. I do not have that much in the way of defenses. This is not a final build. This is a starting point. That's why this guide is really more of an introduction to the build than it is a final product. I only have 1500 armor. I'm not wearing a lightning coil. As you can see, it's a little bit hard to use a 5 blue and 1 red lightning coil. If I could, that would be the only thing that I would ever use again. My jewelry is nothing real spectacular, nothing to write home about. I've got about 4200 health, no mana obviously, and yeah. Dual Apeps for chaos damage. I'll look at my passive tree. I spec down to Volpact. Volpact is what makes all of this possible. I mean, basically, if we are successful in dealing ourselves damage every time we can, we'll be dealing ourselves a ton of damage. Part of that is mitigated by cast when damage taken Mortal Call. But in order to keep us sustained, really we need Volpact. Normal Leech is only going to do about 1000 per second when we have it up, and the amount of damage we're taking will count against that. So if we're dealing ourselves, 500 damage a second, we're kind of eliminating half of what we're getting from leeching. So Volpact is very crucial. Some life nodes, some resist nodes, crit nodes, flask life. I really enjoy having lots of flasks. Then we come and get some of the juicier crit stuff in Shadow. Across the top into Witch with some of the area nodes and spell critical strike. We get all of the power charges and enough strength to use our gear. So that is what I'm doing right now. I'm gonna run this map so that we can see what the build looks like and how the build performs. And then afterwards I'll do a little talking about what I want to do with this build going forward, what else I want to test, and what I have tested, because I have tested some things that are just as unusual as the rest of what I'm doing here. Okay, so let's run this plateau. I'm blood magic, so no auras, which is a little bit unusual. I don't know of another build that doesn't use auras, but it always makes me feel a little bit naked when I'm running around and there's nothing here. Okay, here we go. Okay, so I just about one-shot myself there. Well, things just about one-shot me, but now we've got our build rolling, and everything should be spectacular. See, the neat thing is, effectively here, we're doing a couple of... effectively here, I've got this 6-link Glacial Cascade that I'm casting as though it were an 8-link Glacial Cascade, because nothing is generating power charges for me other than the cast when damage taken gems. In addition, nothing is doing knockback, which, you know, is less than, you know, some people use knockback, some people don't for Glacial Cascade. But it certainly is something that is beneficial. I'm a little bit fuzzy on whether the knockback from Frostwall happens before the spell goes all the way through them or not. But, you know, my testing has been kind of inconclusive on that. But, yeah, regardless, I'd rather have frost walls in front of ranged things than not. There would happen to be spine snakes, though, in the map that I was showing off. There. For those of you not familiar with spine snakes, they're pretty much the worst part about using Frostwall, because you don't do anything to them. Hoping to get into this a little bit later, but the fact that I'm not really, things that deal physical damage are kind of just raping me. It doesn't have to be like that. I've not been the greatest about taking everything that I can to deal with physical damage, and there are a couple of other options that I'm going to explore in terms of other ways that I can continue to proc, because the uncomfortable thing about having a lot of physical damage mitigation is that it means that you will proc less. All of your frost wall, all of your frost wall spells and such, and your power charge on crit spells, and your anything that you're doing with cast when damage taken will proc less often because you're taking less damage. Oh, punishment fell off. That's not normal. There we go. Just get hit like once and it's back up. Because I am terrible at mitigating. You'll notice there was an elemental reflect guy. One of the nice parts about dealing so much chaos damage is that elemental reflect doesn't do all that much. Did I miss the boss?
Far too much baggage.
Oh, there's the boss. we're just gonna keep plowing through here. I'll go by and pick up the rares after I'm done with it. But come on. There we go. That's better. Okay. Hit me. Thank you. I should mention, this is a bit unusual. Like half of the enemies in this map completely walk around Frostwall, and the amount of downtime that Punishment has right now, it's not usual. The spikiness of the damage absolutely is usual, though. I'm sure that there is an adaptation of this build that is usable in hardcore, because everyone says that, and I want to be cool too. But seriously, like, I do think that there should be more people using Frostwall in hardcore than are, because I do think that it is an amazing defensive ability. But there we have it. Our janky build. Just cleared a plateau map. I was not full after all. I was not even close to full. Okay, I'm gonna go back and pick up this rare while I start talking about the things that I want to do with this build next. The biggest hole, obviously, is the amount of physical damage that I take. As I had mentioned, when you get yourself a bunch of physical mitigation, the problem is that you're dealing yourself less damage, which means that you also proc your cast when damage taken gems less often. But there is a way around that, which is that you can up the amount that you reflect to yourself. Punishment, with 20% quality, you can increase the physical damage dealt by normal enemies, which is what you are when you're dealing yourself damage, by as much as 10%. You can also level this gem 3 times, and it's still under required level 31. So you can get, I think it's 41 up to 41% of physical damage reflected back at you. Isn't that great? You can reflect 40% damage. Did you ever think there would be a build that thinks that was a good thing? But this one does, because physical damage is such a small portion of your damage that it's not a big deal, you know? So
ask away.
What I'm going to do is I would like to get a lightning coil with at least 4 blue sockets, and instead of running like this, have a 20 quality level, well, start with a level 1 punishment gem. This 17 quality here that someone was extremely happy to sell me for 10 chaos. And throw lightning coil into the mix. Because lightning coil will reduce the amount of physical damage taken by something like 30%. It's a 40% conversion to lightning, which you resist 75% of. So it's in the realm of 30% less physical damage taken. And then, in addition to that, for a few more points, I can spec down and get iron reflexes. And in that way I can still have the 1200 armor that I have right now on this piece. By the way, I crafted this piece with about 12 exalted currency, almost all of it in fuses, because I think I got pretty lucky on the fuses, but I was able to armor scrap 20% the whole way through, so I think that helped a lot too. But yeah, so this will have about the same level of armor, but flip physical damage taken as lightning, whereas this just has 1200 armor. I also would like to get rid of this. I would like to make this go away and use Windscream instead, so that I can use all crit jewelry. The other thing that I'm fidgeting with is whether or not I actually want to do Blood Magic Gem instead of the Blood Magic Keystone through Malachi Simula. The Blood Magic Gem makes our already expensive Glacial Cascade even more expensive, because it's a 1.9 multiplier or something like that, in place of, I would probably take out increased area. So yeah, it would cost more even when you take out the 20% increased mana cost. But then we would be able to use our head slot for a tri-resist piece, so that again we can use all crit jewelry. Or something else. I don't know, fill in the blank. This is a pretty new build to me. I was hesitant to put this video together just because, like I said, I haven't been running this build for very long. I think it's like less than a week that I've been playing like this. So even though I'm using a level 92 character, I certainly did not get to level 92 by playing this way. Some things that I wished work that don't. Ambu's Charge. Did you ever think you would see a 5-link Ambu's Charge? Now you do, because I thought, how cool would it be if you got an endurance charge every time you crit yourself? Wouldn't that be cool? I mean, you'd be critting yourself, but still, you would be able to have really, really long immortal calls, and effectively still have endurance charges up the whole time, because you'd be critting yourself a ton. Like, every time you went out and crit a pack of enemies, you would crit yourself like 6 times, right? Now I don't know if it would work like that, or if it would work like power charge on crit, where you would crit yourself once, so the spell would give you 1 endurance charge. But it doesn't work, so nuts to that. I've also tested out the flask. I don't have one on me. The flask that gives you 3 charges back when you receive a critical strike. That also does not work for damage taken through reflection through the punishment gem. So unfortunate, but yeah, this has been a fun build for me to put together. And I want to end this with just a little bit of a story on how this build came together, and the way that builds in Path of Exile should happen for some of the people who are newer to making their own builds, just to give people a little bit of encouragement. This build actually started out as a storm calling build. I was originally using storm call, but I was underwhelmed by the amount of damage that I could do. It was going to be a chaos damage storm call, 6-link storm call. So I looked through like every spell that I could find, and finally I settled on Glacial Cascade as something else to try out, because the 80% damage effectiveness on Glacial Cascade, combined with the fact that, you know, you're hitting even really small enemies like twice. So this is, instead of an 80% damage effectiveness, it kind of has 160% damage effectiveness, and higher on bigger enemies. I really like that about Glacial Cascade, by the way, that enemies that normally slow down area of effect spells, like bears and like those big titan things, absolutely melt, because you hit them like, you know, 5 or 6 times or something crazy, and they just fold very quickly. You probably saw when I was dealing with the bears in that last map. So yeah, I wanted to do dual Apeps. I started with Stormcall, then I switched to Glacial Cascade. This is something, Shackles of the Wretched with Punishment, is something that I've been wanting to work for a long time, and every time I try it out, it's bad. It's like really bad. If you watch this video and you thought, man, that does not look like a good build, you should see every other cast when damage taken punishment setup, because it's like this seems serviceable, mostly in comparison to those other builds. But so once I had punishment in there, and I started with one cast when damage taken, because the next thing that I wanted to do, I was sure this was going to work. If I could do enough damage to the enemies through cast when damage taken, I was pretty sure I was going to be able to find a setup so that if I take X amount of damage, I can leech X amount of damage or more through Volpact, so that anytime something hit me for like 500 or 1,000 or 1,500 damage, I would be instantly back up at the health that I lost. This would mean that, for instance, I wouldn't have to run the Life Leech gem, and it would also mean that it would be really, really hard for things to damage me. That doesn't work. What I found out was that what I was hopeful would happen, you'll see when I hover over this ice spear, the chaos damage applies in full, even though it's a level 1 ice spear gem. So you kind of get around this notion that you can only cast a skill gem requiring level 31 or lower by making the amount of damage that you attach to that spell a lot higher. But the problem is that I can almost double what you're seeing there. I can almost make it, you know, 150 damage on average. But that doesn't leech very much with Volpact, even if they have Warlord's markup on them. It just doesn't do that much. So, so after that, I noticed that the power charge on crit that I had attached here, originally this was, instead of a Glacial Cascade, this was another added chaos damage. The power charges were really nice for my main spell. So I thought, why not do 2 spells and a power charge on crit? And then I added this. And that, you know, so the point I'm making here is that when you're making a build in Path of Exile, or really in any game, it's really, really useful to be able to identify when your build is just terrible, but not to let that discourage you. A lot of people who play this game will go through and play the first time through and be like, man, I can't beat Piety, or I can't beat Cruel Piety, or I can't beat Merciless Piety, or I can't beat any form of Dominus. I had a friend who had a really tough time with Dominus. But the point is just kind of keep futzing with stuff. If you don't like how it's working, then change it. And if you don't like how the change is working, then change it again. You know? This originally did not have Shackles of the Wretched. Did not have cast when damage taken shenanigans. The original version of this build only really had this 6-link spell and Lightning Warp. And that was it. Like, all of my other gem slots were empty. And they got filled in because I found cool things to go with them. But like you can see on my gem levels, I'm not that far into this. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you like an idea, stick with something like the idea that you like, instead of just going out and saying, well, I'm not doing this very well, so clearly I just need to go and follow someone else's guide. It is so much more fulfilling and so much more fun to play something really unusual that is yours than it is to be one of 20 low-life Mjolnir builds, or one of 20, Shatterchuck builds, or, whatever happens to be flavor of the month at the time. Just have fun. That's the point. Anyway, that was my long-winded bit. Hopefully you stopped listening a while ago, if all you wanted to see was my numbers and how well I cleared. And on the topic of that, before I go here, I should probably actually show you, if I was lying to you originally about how much, there we go, about how much come on, power charges, come on, seriously, power charges, let's do this. Oh, fuck you, power charges. There we go, 23k, 23.3, which means that we're effectively doing, even to these medium-sized guys, like 46k damage. It is apparently really hard to get power charges on guys who die in one hit. Okay, well, hopefully you've enjoyed this guide. Hopefully it looks cool to you. Hopefully it just doesn't look terrible. But yeah, thanks for watching.